Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Vito x DINO podcast. This is episode number 58. My name is Vito Delsante. His name is Dean Haspiel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dean Haspiel. By the way, real quick, before we introduce our guests, we always try to make a match to the episode number.
Uh,
And I don't know what your 58 is, but I was reminded recently that I am 58. I thought I was 57.
yes.
I'm 58, and I'm going to be 59 in May. And I'm like, what is going on?
You,
What
you
about
you
you,
look
Joe?
absolutely amazing, dude.
Well, Joe, are we the same age? Are you younger?
I'm a little younger. I turned 57 this year.
Nice. Nice. And
Yeah.
Vito, you're 53?
I'll be 53 in June, but I just say that I'm 53. Might as why wait?
That's what we tend to do when we are getting there. We just anyway. I was a year off. It sucks. Great, wonderful. Thank you, Joe. That's really kind of you. Everybody, Joe Illidge.
Joe Illidge, the
Hey, everyone.
one of the I would say Joe, for all of his titles, is probably the one that no one uses to describe you that I think should be used to describe you is tastemaker. Like you are
Wow.
a
Very kind.
person who's got impeccable taste, number one, but also your influence on the comic book industry, um, greater, great and small projects. Either way, I think your taste, that how you pick those projects, is unmatched. I can't think of anybody that maybe Shelley Bond. Like
I
I would
mean,
say,
wow.
like
Yeah.
I'd say the two of you probably have the best taste in comics.
Well,
Um,
thank you. That's a very kind thing to say, all things considered. So I will take it graciously and I appreciate it.
and
That's great that you said that, Vito, because I did want to talk to Joe later on, and maybe we can get into it now. But I'd rather kind of introduce people who don't know Joe Illidge. I want Joe to talk about his kind of resume a little bit, but the fact that you and I, Vito, have been trying to build universes, and Joe has built universes, and
yeah,
that's kind of a taste making type of job, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that later. But I guess the first question is where'd you start, man? Like, how did you begin this journey in comics?
It's crazy. I mean, listen, for all of us, the journey begins. Like once you hold your first one and read it, you're either in or out. And if you're in until you're dead. I mean, because, comic books are magical. Now, most people didn't believe this, right? We are the mutants of society. We're the strange X-Men that understood this like a long time ago before there was such a thing as a Marvel Cinematic Universe or a DC Studios. We understood that comics were alchemy and was no other medium like it, right? So I mean, for me, it began in the first grade. My earliest comics, when my mom would buy them for me, was All-Star Comics with the Justice Society of America, was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, Superman family, Batman family. Like, I was a DC kid up until the fourth grade when an aunt bought me an X-Men comic book. And then I became a Marvel head, like, because,
Hmm.
I was a kid of the 70s. I'm growing up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. I'm a black kid. And the kids were like, DC stands for dumb comics. So what was I doing reading DC comics? Like all the cool kids were reading X-Men, which at that time was Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin, right? Glynis Oliver, right?
Tom
Iron,
Warzachowski.
come on, yeah.
Yep.
Tom Warzachowski, the lettering deity of
hmm,
comics,
Yep.
along with like Todd Klein.
Yep.
Iron Man was like David Michelinie, like Bob Layton, right? Like Avengers would go back and forth between John Byrne and George Perez,
Ugh.
written by David Michelinie. I'm like all Marvel comics. They were I Moon Knight was Doug mentioned Bill Sienkiewicz. Master of Kung Fu was Doug mentioned Paul Gulacy, right? We could go on and on and on.
Yep.
But Marvel in the 70s, there was nothing like it, man. And that's just real for real.
And then
And
80s
so,
came by, and then even in the 80s, but you go on. I mean, like they've had so many great eras, and at one point, me and Vito were talking about this. At one point, I realized if I had to cut off, what's my cutoff for Marvel? If I had to be like, all right, I can't keep every comic book, and there's been a lot of great series, but for
yeah,
me, I think it's Secret War is the 25th anniversary of Marvel. I think we ended Secret Wars, and then
100%.
you get all those 70s and 80s and 60s Marvel, right? And there have been
Yeah.
nice spurts since, but
Yep.
not
Yep.
like that. Not like that.
No, listen, all respect to Jim Shooter, God rest his soul, who changed comics and changed global entertainment through the comics he shepherded as editor in chief and the comics he wrote during Marvel and after Marvel. But Secret Wars and Crisis on Infinite Earths, they were running at the same time. And Crisis was just better. Crisis was better.
It
The
was
stakes were
riskier.
higher. The drama was larger. And then after that, DC just went for broke. It was Superman by Marv Wolfman, Jerry Ordway, and John Byrne. It was Wonder Woman by George Perez. It was Batman Year One. Batman Year One, which is the gold standard of comics, period. Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli. That's coming off of The Dark Knight Returns, Camelot 3000, um, Frank Miller's Ronin, Thriller, like DC
Watchmen.
Watchmen with Crisis on Infinite Earths. They went into the stratosphere. They
And
became a publisher that was so daring that I don't remember a time of excitement like that since I think it was something like 1978, like the DC explosion,
I was gonna say before the
right?
explosion, probably.
But I think in the 80s, I think they had this line, the new DC, there's no stopping us now.
hmm
And you believed it.
So, so
Mhm.
where
You
did that?
believed it.
Where do those kids in Flatbush fall on that once Crisis came out?
Oh my God, by the time Christ came out, I'm in high school. God only
uh,
knows where those dudes are. I'm in high school, and it's like
Right.
I'm being told, because 80s geek, I'm being told, Joe, you got to stop talking about these comic books if you want to get some sex because, girls aren't into comic books. You gotta figure out how to have a secret identity. I wasn't that great with it. I ended up being fortunate enough to have sex anyway, but but
kind of all of it.
like so when Christ happened, I was deep in high school, and actually this is important. During my time at High School of Art and Design, there was a guy named Mark Matos, and he took a number of us on a tour to the Marvel offices. Guess he had relationships there. And this is a guy that was kind of like our age or a little older. So he was like the equivalent of like the Fonz or something like that. We were like, what? You're taking us on a tour of Marvel Comics? Go there. And an editor had an original page of Bill Sienkiewicz for Elektra Assassin. An original page. And that was my first time being in the offices of a comic book company. And I think that was the beginning for me. I
Yep.
think when I saw like this is a business, people in offices, they get to be around original art every day and make these magical things. Okay. Like that, I think cemented in my head, like this is real.
So you're talking late 80s probably because there was a good chance that Elektra assassin page you saw, I had done something on that page.
Oh my goodness. You know which
Isn't
one
that
it was? Listen, it was the page, it was a splash page with Elektra getting on a plane. Do you remember that page?
I do remember it. I don't remember what I worked, to be honest. It might have been
Yeah.
only actually the first issue or the second issue, the first two, and then Bill basically moved to Connecticut and was kind of out
Oh,
from because he was going back and forth from Connecticut. He wanted to have a studio, and then that studio was Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Bill Sienkiewicz. Down the hall
yes.
was Chaikin, Simonson, and Jim
Oh
Sherman.
my God.
And I worked at both, and that's 1985. That's after school. 19. It's crazy,
Yeah,
So
it was around that time. It was
right.
around that time, and it's different. It's different from holding a comic book in your hand and seeing the original art at its real scale, right? And it's funny because I actually just posted this, I think yesterday on one of my TikTok videos, is that I created my first comic book at the age of 15,
Mm,
right? Because
hmm
I'm in high school of art and design.
Yep.
You know, a number of us are comic book geeks. So I had a friend, Caesar Antimate, who would go on to work for Harris doing Vampirella comics. And then for a while, he was an inker on the hardware series at Milestone. Um, he and I got together and we made a 22-page superhero comic. I still have the original pages in my basement in an unopened envelope because back in the day, you were told the way to copyright something was to
Yeah.
mail it to yourself and never, ever open it. So that envelope with the postmarks from like 1985 is in my basement. One day, those pages will know oxygen again. And that's when I'm going to actually launch that idea,
Yep.
right? And it'll obviously be it'll be a better version of it.
Sure.
But
Sure.
so making comics was in me from being a teenager. Seeing the business of comics was that first visit to Marvel. But from there, my journey began when I interned at Milestone in 1993, right? And
hmm
I was in the offices 3 days a week for 3 months. And I was 23 years old. And, like I said, I was a kid of the 70s. I was a teenager of the 80s. I did not know where I was going to go. I didn't have any real destinations. I had fantasy destinations, but I didn't have any real destinations. I went to high school of art and design. I went to school of visual arts because I deluded myself into thinking I was going to be a comic book artist. And then after I graduated from SVA, a friend of mine had a conversation with me straight up, and it was quite sobering. And he said, if you saw your work on the street, would you buy it?
Mm.
And he said, if the answer is yes, then you have a future as an artist. If the answer is no, then you don't. And I went to bed that night and I woke up that morning. I was like, I do not have a future as an artist. I am not good enough. I do not have the passion. I do not have the skill. But I do have the capability to be a writer.
Hmm.
And so what happened was I was working at this art supply store and somebody walks in and buys some art supplies and then they walk out and my coworker tells me as that person is going through the door that that was Jimmy Palmiotti. Now I knew of the name Jimmy Palmiotti because he was basically the inker of comic books in the 90s, in the early 90s. I ran outside Wally West speed, boy. And, I said to him, hey, Mr. Palmiotti, nice to meet you. Hey, I'd love to talk to you because I've been sending these pitches to Marvel Comics Presents and no one's getting back to me. And he says, okay, give me your name and give me your address. And I did. 1 month later, I got a note from the editor who gave me detailed critiques of all three pitches
Oh, wow.
that I sent. And I was like, okay, Jimmy Palmiotti is the standard.
hmm
He's
He's
the
always
standard
super
of a
helpful.
he's
He's
the
always,
standard
yeah,
of a guy of a person who his word is his bond, and
yep,
he was the standard of someone in comics, right? And
yeah.
so that was pre-Milestone, but then interning at Milestone, seeing the business, seeing the creativity, um, that was it. That's when I was like, okay, this is where it can all come together for me. This is possible as a career, as a future,
Who was your mentor?
right? Well, I had multiple mentors. I was very fortunate because all four of them were my mentors, right? So, um, Derek T. Dingle, who was the president, was my business mentor. Michael Davis, right, who was a co-founder, and I think he was titled the director of special projects. Um, he was a different type of business mentor, not the business of money, but the business of people
Hmm.
and human psychology, right? Um, Dennis Cowan, um, of course, he was my mentor, one in terms of how he carried himself. I felt like he carried himself in this very like classy way. Like I've said before, to me, he was basically the Billy D. Williams of comics.
I was just gonna say.
As cool as Billy D. Williams was when I was growing up, that's who Dennis was. He was the Billy D. Williams of comics.
Hmm.
But additionally, he said something to me I never forgot. I didn't always follow this advice, but as I got older, I followed it more. He said, don't always say the first thing you're thinking.
Mm.
He said, think some more and say the second thing. Don't always say the first thing that you're thinking. And I'm 23 years old, so I'm like, what are you talking about? He was right. Do not always say the first thing that you're thinking. Um, and then finally, Dwayne McDuffie,
Mm.
who would be my first editorial mentor and the person who taught me the love of story and the purpose of story, right?
Mm.
Um, which in my mind is to unite humanity.
Mm.
And the chances of that are slim, but if they weren't, it wouldn't be a noble profession to be a writer. Yeah.
Yeah, when I
So
when I was asked
those,
like what do you do comics for or whatever, what are you trying to do in stories? It takes a while, man. You know that. Like you just said, you're young, you're not listening to half these proverbs or whatever people are dropping some kind of science or knowledge. But I
yeah,
always say I'm trying to make human connections through my work. Now, am I trying to, what did you say again about unite humanity,
unite
right?
humanity.
I mean, maybe that's a part of it. I also think that's such a bold task.
100%.
I mean,
Lofty.
I,
yeah.
I mean, if we get a little bit more specific, let's try this. When we're all experiencing the same thing, the things that divide us disappear.
Mm.
When
Hmm.
we're all in the theater
Hmm.
watching Avengers Endgame,
Hmm.
when we're all reading Absolute Batman, when we all experienced, depending on our age, like Luke Skywalker learning Darth Vader was his father, when we experience these stories, all the differences disappear. So, in that time of experience, humanity is united.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So, maybe more specifically, that's what I'm talking about.
And that's a great example, but in terms of comics, like I think I can cite X-Men 137. I can say
Oh my God.
Daredevil like 191. Is it
Oh
191?
my. Yes,
Like,
191, the
but
Russian roulette issue with Bullseye.
Mhm.
no, no, no. I think
No.
when Elektra gets killed
Oh,
by
that's 181.
that's 181. Sorry. I can
Yeah.
say certain number, Thor 237, like, but I don't know in the last 20 years that I could say a title and a number and this thing you're talking about where it's like the water cooler conversation of comics,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
We
Yep.
don't
Yep.
have that conversation
You-
anymore.
listen,
Well, there's the
listen,
internet, but that's probably why.
listen.
But
What you're saying, I heard Rob Liefeld say that in an interview like 3, 4 weeks ago. He said, we don't have the moments
Mm.
mhm,
to be discussing 10, 20 years from now. Now, what I would say to you is, I think there is one book that has the moments that people will be talking about 10, 20 years from now, and it's Absolute Batman.
Mhm.
mhm,
I think Absolute Batman is like the introduction drug
mhm.
to like a whole community of people. And 10, 20 years from now, they will be talking about the moments.
It's funny,
And to
Nick.
your point, we need that back.
It's funny. Nick Papora was saying almost exactly the same thing when we interviewed him. Nick from JHU Comics.
Oh yeah, Nick, of
He,
course.
he had pretty much said that Absolute Batman is like um, kind of like the taste of the drug that gets you into like comics, like it's the modern day equivalent of like an Incredible Hulk 181, where you're like, who's that little short guy, or
Well,
something
Yeah.
or
like that.
I mean, it's funny because I have not read Absolute Batman or any of the Absolute comics. I have picked up Absolute Martian Manhunter
Right.
and I haven't read it yet, but I
Yeah.
love the
Yeah.
artwork and I will read it. But anyway,
Yeah.
but like so that to your point though, like um what is the like at one point it was Image Comics for a lot of people that brought them into comics, right? And then there was
Yes.
manga
Yes.
that brought people into
Yes.
comics, and now
Yes.
YA brings people into comics. And I feel in a way that I and maybe I'm totally wrong, and I could ask Scott Snyder, but to me, Absolute Batman from afar, okay, 58 going on 59, I just see like a little bit of Image, a little bit of bootleg comics, and I think that like when you have Monty Keene doing bootleg Spider-Man, I wonder if editorials like how do we do another Batman comic? How do we make this interesting and sexy again? And I think they're poaching from and taking a look at all the different things that people respond to these days in not in a united way but in the different kind of lanes that everybody's in, right? And they
Yeah.
somehow I think put that together and made like blended that and made Absolute Batman that could hit all those little points that you're talking about in
Bingo.
a way,
100%. Oh, Absolute Batman is a convergence of a number of pillars,
Mhm.
right.
right? One of those pillars is manga.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it. If you
Yeah.
look at the way Nick Dragata is designing pages, double page splashes, he's definitely looking at manga. And if he's not actively looking at it, it has seeped into his DNA and
Mhm.
it is coming out through the pages, right? So that's a factor. A factor that every year or two, there's the same online conversation. Well, Batman could really fix Gotham City if he wanted to because he has all this money. That ridiculous conversation. And then it's like, well, if we're in a time of extreme wealth and extreme poverty and the erosion of the middle class, and being a billionaire is bad, then take that away from him entirely.
Mhm.
And then what do you get, right? Then you're having the conversation that a bunch of people want to have, which is for Batman to be relevant to me, you got to take away the money. And taking away the money doesn't mean he had the money, but you've taken it away. It's he never had it.
Mhm.
It's he never had it. And his perspective on extreme wealth is our perspective on extreme wealth.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, every victory of Batman's is a wish fulfillment fantasy of ours.
Let me ask you a question, Joe. You were at one point an editor on Batman comics
Yes,
at DC. Um,
yes.
looking at, I mean, you have a lot of high praise for Absolute Batman, and it's warranted. Like it's a really fun book. Um, how would you have approached it had it come to you 20 years ago? Uh,
God. Well, let me put it to you this way. Um, 27 years ago, under the editorial leadership of Denny O'Neil, myself and my colleagues, we were part of something called Batman No Man's Land,
right.
which I consider the best long range Batman event ever done in Batman comics. And it was the most naturalistic approach to Batman because the villains weren't these kind of like, it wasn't the larger than life version of them, right? There wasn't a supervillain that was responsible for the situation. Gotham City had gone through uh, uh, an outbreak, right? A viral outbreak,
Right.
and then it went through an earthquake. So the city had become decimated to the point where the United States government considered it a hazard zone and blew the bridges and turned off all the power and had no supplies going in or coming out. And Gotham City was basically reduced to a feudal society. And then you get to tell a very human story about the fall and rise of humanity, right? And No Man's Land was a 1 year event. Before the show 24, No Man's Land was a weekly event, right? 52 comics, one after the other. You couldn't miss one, and no books could be late, or
Yeah.
the whole lane of dominoes would fall apart. So I was a part during that editorial time. And what that did is we increased the sales of the Batman line overall by like 25%. And Batman once again became the top selling character at DC Comics. So my answer to you is that No Man's Land was the absolute
I
Batman
can see it.
of my era, right? Because it made it gave you a Batman who got his spirit broken, who ran away, whose girlfriend slapped him up and straightened him out, who was Talia al Ghul. And then he had to go back, and then he had to adopt the language. He had to learn again. He had to earn back his title as the Batman, right? That's us. That's us. Big things happen. We get broken. We go into the shadows. If we're lucky, we have a loved one that straightens us out, and we get our ass up and we go back into the fight to regain our courage, to regain our purpose, to regain our direction.
You know,
That's something that people could identify with then, and young people are identifying with what the absolute Bruce Wayne is going through now.
so I mean, you're making me want to read the damn comic. All right.
Dude, well,
What?
listen, it just so happens there's two omnibuses.
Yeah, I think I might have. Yeah, and then the new stuff I want to read. And then, in fact, I was going through a little bit of a deep dive on the Grant Morrison Batman,
God.
which is
Oh, listen,
bananas, right? Like
bananas.
In the best,
bananas,
in the
right?
best ways.
But in the best way.
It's great
So I
Batman.
need to read that because I didn't read. I read the Frank Quitely where like Nightwing is Batman and he's got the
Yeah.
Sun is the Robin, and
Yeah,
so I
Batman
read
and
that,
Robin.
and that was fun
Yeah.
with some like psychotic kind of Leatherface villain called Pig or something like
Professor
that.
Pig.
Like,
Professor Pig.
what the hell? Anyway, so but what you're describing, Joe, in No Man's Land was when Batman, well, first of all, Frank Miller made Batman bigger in Dark Knight Returns, and so he had like a posse and a whole bunch of kids, whatever, right? But to
Yeah,
me, growing up, I never saw Batman to be that big. You know, I always thought he was such a conflict because you had one guy that would flash a signal, you know, Commissioner Gordon, and he had a relationship with this potentially crazy dude. I had many discussions in my studio at Deep Six with Mike Cavallaro and Simon Fraser, and the question is, Batman crazy? And I always said,
Right.
I thought maybe he was, you know, he's definitely
Right.
traumatized, but is he crazy? And I think he is crazy, and his bat thing is a PTSD, all that stuff. And then Mike Cavallaro was like, no, he's not crazy. And I'm like, okay. So like we'd have these fun debates, right? Like, but he got bigger, and Batman got bigger and became kind of like where Superman was a symbol and Captain America is a symbol, right?
Yeah.
Batman became a kind of a symbol, even though he's a vigilante, not like the Punisher who kills people, because he won't kill people. And Batman, at some point early on, I don't know when it happened, won't carry a gun or shoot a gun because of how
That's right.
bad guns are. So
That's right.
but then like, for me, it's like there's something that was always like more intimate. That Bruce Wayne and Batman was more of an intimate character to me, and maybe that's how I see, you know. And the fact that he's gotten so big is, to me, a little crazy, you know. Like, I don't mean in sales, but I meant in Gotham. And the thing that made sense to me, and this is what I wanted to bring it to, is the you know, the recent Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, right?
Yes, the Batman, Matt Reeves. Yeah,
the Batman, Matt Reeves. Early on in the movie, there's a scene where I guess he's talking and they're showing the city. And I think a burglar or someone's about to rob or something like that. And then he looks down an alley and it's just dark. And Batman is not there,
Yep.
but he could be. And what
Yep.
was cool about what the young Batman was, he was creating the idea that he was everywhere, and it
Yep.
was making criminals have second thoughts, you know,
Yep.
even though he probably wasn't down that alley, you know, lurking or waiting. And that to me is Batman. And I loved that idea, you know, that's how his influence could be on the city, you know. And then there's the
Yeah.
money thing, of course, which you already said
Yeah.
in the absolute, he never even had money, which is
Right.
that's interesting. Like, who is Bruce Wayne then? What's it is
No
who is he?
spoilers, man. You
See?
got to read it.
I gotta read it.
See?
I gotta read it. I gotta read it.
Try the first trade paperback and see if it's your cup of tea. But
Right.
you know, it's interesting to your point about Batman being big, but Batman also being intimate. I think if anyone really got that, well, I think Denny O'Neil certainly got that, but I think the other person that got that was Paul Dini.
Mm.
Because when you think about how did Batman become bigger, I think it's the juncture point of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman the Animated Series, and the 1989 Batman film. I think those three things came together and created the triangle that shot Batman into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're talking about the animated series, you're talking about Paul Dini. And I think Dini understood the intimacy of Bruce Wayne's character.
I watched a video, I think it was yesterday, I don't know when you posted it, where you cited an interesting experiment in storytelling, which is to create the villain first.
Yes.
Like create Joker before Batman. Because usually what happens, and I forget who's the who's the guy that everyone talks about in terms of heroes and villains, and he's like a famous
Joseph Campbell.
So Joseph Campbell, I think the idea is that if you have that you wouldn't have supervillains if you didn't have a superhero. Like the invention of superhero means, is that Joseph Campbell?
Yes, hero with 1,000 faces.
Means that
right here by my
you're
desk.
going to yield, or what has to happen is a super villain has to happen with a superhero, for it to have an arch nemesis. I don't know. I think there's this concept, and I don't totally get it and understand it, but I appreciate it, and I think it's cool. But I love the idea that if you create a supervillain first, then it has to have a superhero to fight the villain, like. So, and I love that idea, that exercise of coming up with that first, because in a way, I feel like, I don't know, we were talking to Mark Waid recently, and how like he never knew when he wrote the last page of an issue of Daredevil and put him in a pickle, how he was going to get out of that pickle. He so that if you didn't know, the reader, he didn't know it, then you have to figure it out, next issue kind of thing. So, but I like the idea. What I was going to say is, I think what happens is if you're handed Daredevil or Batman, what are you thinking about first? Well, what's the conflict? Who's he supposed to fight? Right. And you have a roster, a rogues gallery, but then sometimes you might want to invent, like this Professor Pig guy, like things like that. You can invent stuff. And I think that's really cool. But the story is interesting because if you don't have that conflict and that kind of like level of nemesis, because when I'm watching George Reeves take a gun and turn it into a pretzel and like that, and then maybe jumps out a window and flies away, that's the level of of villainy that he usually faces in those 1950s Superman TV shows. But then like it keeps upping, and then for me, what happened with Superman, if we're going to veer away from Batman for a second, is I felt like he got too strong and too godlike, and he's much more interesting because of kryptonite, because of people trying to be like, you can't be a god, like, who do you think you are, kind of thing. And of course, it just so happens to be the nicest guy on planet Earth is Superman, thankfully, and I know a lot of creators try to come up with, well, what if it's an asshole Superman, and then you create those characters as well, so I guess where I wanted to veer from here was, like, you have co-created new universes, new superhero universes, like Lion Forge, do you feel like And then what are the successes of those things? Because what I think the hardest thing to do when you're coming up with a new superhero universe is that there's already Marvel and DC that are a
Right.
legacy for everyone. Everyone knows
Sure.
those characters, even if they haven't read a comic book. They
Yeah.
know, just like Greek and Norse gods.
Right.
Because superheroes are American mythology.
Right.
It's so difficult to come up with 5, 6 new heroes and create a new Avenger team or X-Men or whatever. Do you feel like that you're a little bit ahead of your time, because it's hard to sell these comics to the readers that are already inundated with Marvel and DC? Like, do they have the bandwidth, And
Yeah.
I'm talking about a handful of people, or you and me and Vito, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about the masses, the general audience, who I
Yeah.
guess they were a little into Hellboy, a little bit into Invincible, but you got to sprinkle those out, like, are they ready for another universe?
So I think it's a great question, and that big question has micro questions. So let me put it to you this way. So even since the time when Catalyst Prime was launched, which was
That's
2017,
right, Catalyst Prime.
our industry has become smaller, even though the illusion is that it's become larger.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact
Mm-hmm.
of the matter, it's really become smaller in terms of
Mm-hmm.
who are the viable publishers, who are the real publishers.
Right.
It's become smaller. And so, keep it straight and plain, Lion Forge was funded by wealth. And so that meant that, we had a formidable budget to get formidable talent that was working at both Marvel and DC. In a real sense, the way that I think you can't beat Marvel and DC for sales. I don't even think, well, actually, Robert Kirkman and Ryan Ottley's Invincible may be an exception because that thing is selling for real, for real. The compendiums,
Yeah.
the manga sized digest, obviously fortified by the Amazon Prime cartoon, but Invincible sells. But in general, you can't really beat Marvel and DC. Let me tell you how I think Catalyst Prime was a success. Now, number one, I never thought we could beat them. I never thought we could beat them in sales. I thought the best thing that we could do was qualitatively make the best line of books. If we've got 7 books, are these 7 books in ratio, the percentage, equal to Marvel and equal to DC? Right? So that was one, it was quality. 2 is, and this I could never have anticipated. So I launched that line 9 years ago, right? 2017 was when the first books came out. And I was there for 2017 and 2018. I was there for 2 years. So this is 8 years in the future. People still talk fondly of those books.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kari
All of,
shared his Noble cover the other day. Yeah.
listen, yes, he did. All of the entertainment that human beings, that comic book fans have been bombarded with in the last 8 years, and somehow there's still room in here and in here for people to say to me, I miss Catalyst Prime.
Hmm.
I love those books. And so when you were kind enough to call me a tastemaker, Vito, I think it rings true there
I
because
think
somehow
absolutely.
I with great talent and with some providence and with what was instilled in me by the Milestone founders and people like Denny O'Neil, I was able to shepherd something that was impactful enough that almost a decade later, people come to me and say, those books mattered to me.
I think
And so in that context, it very much was a success and continues to be a success.
I think one of the things of recently that you worked on was Epiphany Engine, that
Yes,
was like a collective of Black creators doing
yes,
a kind of shared universe event comic, and
yes. Still working on it.
and you're editing it, correct?
Yes, I am the editorial director of that book. Yes.
So it's not in terms of like I don't think that one would fall under the taste making because you didn't select everyone per se, but you're shepherding it, and I think that
Yes.
speaks to some aspect of being a not only an editor, but again, the phrase tastemaker.
Yes.
How does that go for you? Like, do you just see that that Tony and a couple of others are trying to bring something together, and you're like, I can help, this project, or is it they approach you? Like, how do you get involved in that?
Tony approached me.
Okay.
He approached me to come on board, and I was like, this is a project of a lifetime. There's no way I'm not going to
I
do it.
adore Tony very much because
You know,
he's a self-starter, and
yeah,
he's very like Dean is very fond of saying you have to show up to your own party, and I think Tony is one of those people that shows up to his own party every time. He's out there, he's always pushing it, and he's always teasing new projects and stuff. And I find that like guys like him, usually fall under the radar. And I encouraged him to go to Baltimore. I think Dean, he was on a panel with you that I was supposed to be on because I wanted him to be exposed to a new audience.
Mm.
yeah.
And I think
That was a good panel.
yeah, and
Mhm.
and I find that Tony is somebody that maybe doesn't have the exposure and the polish of being exposed, like once
Right.
you're out there over and over again. So when I saw that you were working with him, I got really happy because again, I've known you for, 15, 20 years. I've known Tony for about uh 10 to 7 years or so. So it's like that's a good combination of folks. So go ahead, Dean. I'm sorry.
No, I this is what is because we've all been in the game so long. It's like,
Hmm.
oh my God, the ebbs, the flows, the ups, the downs, and like I just wanted to like I wasn't finished with Catalyst Prime yet, too. What I wanted
Yeah.
to ask about was who did you think you were, man, to try to start off like create five or six new heroes and try to appeal. Now, I will say this, just like when Walking Dead happens, right? And then
Yeah.
suddenly publishers are like, "Oh, we cannot do a zombie book because that, like, what are you talking about? Walking Dead just created an appetite.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
don't do
That's
another
right.
Walking Dead, but you can do
Right.
another zombie comics. Like, what are you talking?
Right.
Like, superheroes didn't stop, necessarily. Although they a lot of publishers like won't have a superhero genre in their publishing plan because they
That's
don't want
right.
to deal with Marvel and DC.
That's
So
right.
who did you think you were to like suddenly? And then what was the puzzle pieces? Like, I'm gonna have this kind of character. I'm gonna have that kind of character. Like, what were you thinking?
Okay. Great question. So let me tell you what happened. So, you know, they asked me to come on board because the owner wanted his own milestone, right? Milestone impacted him greatly, especially Static. He was like, I want my own milestone. And, I want you to come on board and shepherd it. Okay. So I'm gonna keep it very real for you now. They had they had started before and they had some assets. The assets were not up to what I considered the standard
Hmm.
to go up against Marvel and DC. I said, you need to jettison these assets and we need to start all over again. Those assets were worth $20,000
Wow.
and they jettisoned them. And we started again. And I said, okay, where's your Bible? And they gave me a 4-page document. Now I started my career at Milestone. Milestone had a 150-page Bible. I go over to the Batman office. Batman had like an 80-page Bible. So when they gave me a 4-page document, I was like, oh, I see. I'm really gonna have to build this from the ground up. I said, okay. They had like a few characters, some very basic ideas, like 4-sentence ideas or whatever. So I'm like, okay, so there's a nucleus of some characters. So I said, okay, I need to put together a writer's room, right? Because I got that from television. I'm like, okay, who are some of the best writers in comics who have superstar talent but aren't necessarily superstars, right? And that's how I found the writers. And then we had our like 2-day, 3-day conference. And we figured out the first like 2 years of Catalyst Prime. And then I had an assistant editor named Desiree Rodriguez who wrote an article that just impressed the hell out of me about Latino identity in comics. And I said to the upper management, I was like, she needs to be in comics. I want to bring her on as assistant editor. So combined, we made the Bible, the Catalyst Prime Bible. It was like 60 to 75 pages, right? So we start making the books. And the books are going to start coming out in a few months. And no one in the company wanted to be the voice of the line. No one from upper management, right? And one of the things that I understood is that the reason that Marvel will always be Marvel is because during the Marvel age of comics, Stan Lee was the voice of Marvel. Stan Lee spoke to the people and they felt seen. They felt like that was their Uncle Stan or that was their cool dad. Marvel was appealing to college graduates in the 60s. It was freaking counterculture. And I knew that if we were going to go up against Marvel and DC, Catalyst Prime needed a voice. And if no one else wanted to be the voice, then I had no choice. I didn't want to be the voice. Okay? But something that I learned, and listen, I am still working at trying to be the best one that I can be. But something I've learned about leadership is that you don't pick the moment picks you.
Absolutely.
And when I realized that I had to be the voice of this impossible endeavor, that was who I decided this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that was it. I certainly channeled some of Dwayne McDuffie. There's no doubt about it. But in that moment where I said I'm going to be the voice because there has to be one. And it has to be a voice that is sincere, right? It has to be the voice of a believer. Because if I don't believe, then how will you believe? And if I do believe, maybe I can make you believe. Okay? So that was it. So that's who I thought I was. I thought I was Stanley.
And was that the first time you had a moment like that, or was there previous moments that had sputters or something like that, or kind of shorted out, or was this like the moment? And ever since this moment, has this been the driving engine, the driving force of Joe Illidge?
It's a great question. I had one moment like that before that. It was in the aftermath of Dwayne McDuffie's death, and I was able to mourn, and I saw what Milestone had accomplished disappearing from the industry. The industry was going away from diverse perspectives. And in some arrogance, I thought, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm not going to live in a world where Dwayne McDuffie is dead and everything we did at Milestone will mean nothing. And this industry will go back to being a racially homogenous empire. I was like, nope, I don't accept that. And I said, I will go back and I will put the industry to task. And I will be the voice that says to you, I know what you do, I know what you've done, and I'm going to force you to change through conversations that you will not escape. And because at that time, I wasn't trying to work for any of the big two, I had nothing to fear. And that's what they're not used to. They're not used to people who don't have anything to fear from them,
Hmm.
right? So that was the first kind of moment like that
Hmm.
where I made the decision to be an agent of change. Catalyst Prime was second. And ever since then, and listen, sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail. And when you fail, you learn lessons from the failure, and that's how you become better. But I feel like my position has been to always leave some impact wherever I am, to always make some kind of contribution, right? So even at heavy metal, where I was for 3 years, I can look back and say, Tarna from the 1981 animated film, which you kept in a box, is now your Batman, is now your tip of the spear character. And that was in part because of me. Because when I was interviewed by the CEO, I said, I will work for you if we can do two things. One, if we can make Tarna the tip of spear character of this company. And two, if every creator I bring to this company gets paid on time. Now, the second one turned out to be a lie, but the first one we did.
Right, right. I
Well, I wanted to ask.
oh, go ahead, Vito.
I just wanted to ask one like kind of follow-up question. In the years since these events have happened, how does a person recognize the moment? Like, how do you know when the moment's upon you, and how do you know that it's time to act? I mean, I think this kind of goes more, beyond comics. I mean, it's almost like, looking outside the door and, like the world that we're living in or the country that we're living in. And, like I said, I want to know, like, how do we know to recognize the moment?
I mean, man, like, okay, so it's something like this. I think with comics especially, I think the comic book industry is run by an engine of masochism.
Hmm.
I think that most of the people in comics make this stuff because they love it, knowing that it causes them pain. It causes them
Absolutely. Yeah.
financial pain. It causes them emotional pain. It causes them physical pain. All three of those pains are interconnected. But the pain of not being in comics is greater than any and all of those other pains. So they engage in masochism, right? Okay. When you hit the moment where the suffering is greater than the gain, that's it.
Hmm.
That's the moment where you're like, what comes next will be worse than
Mm.
what is. And I don't want to accept that. I don't want to accept the worst possible option, man. And the thing is, again, and I've said this recently, I'm not changing the world in medicine. I'm not changing the world in law. I'm not changing the world in politics, right? But what I do know is that stories impact people profoundly. So here in this corner of all of it, this is where that geek from Flatbush in the 70s who turned out to be a late bloomer with girls in the 80s, right? That's where that person can make a difference, right? Because
Yeah.
we're creating the stories that get people by. We're creating the stuff that inspires them.
Dude, caveman walls, okay? Started there,
Bingo,
right?
bingo,
Like it's
bingo.
been there forever. The stick in the sand, like draw something in the sand, like before we had pulp, paper, pixels, whatever.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
like for people who who are listening to you, listening to you, and probably are being galvanized at this very moment, because you really have come to you have a great pulpit, you know. And it's funny because you and I, Joe, have talked in bars, and we always get into it like this, you know. So this is just
100%.
natural, right?
Yeah.
Um, for people who don't know what is Milestone originally, what happened to Milestone, and where's Milestone now? And I feel like I think there was supposed to be uh what do you call it? Not a resuscitation, but and I don't know what's going on. And then what is your milestone? Like, what was the milestone? What happened? Where did it go? And where's yours?
Yeah. Milestone is a comic book publisher. I believe the business on paper started in 1991, but they started publishing in February 1993. The company was founded by Dwayne McDuffie, Derek T. Dingle, Michael Davis, Dennis Cowan, and, as we would learn later, Christopher Priest. Christopher Priest is basically the fifth Beatle of Milestone, right? And it was the first publisher in comics, in North American comics, of a multicultural superhero universe to have a publishing deal with an industry giant, which was DC Comics. It was a very unique deal. I don't think there was another deal like it preceding that. Um, Milestone's first iteration of publishing went from 1993 to 1997. What happened, or at least I, I don't know if this was the impetus or the catalyst, but Milestone's most popular character turned out to be Static, because of a cartoon named Static Shock that ran from, I think, 2000 to 2003. But while Milestone was publishing in the 90s, the 25th issue of Static was about Static possibly losing his virginity to his girlfriend Daisy. And there was a cover in which Static, fully in his costume, his mask was off so you could see his face, was on the couch with his girlfriend, who was fully clothed except for maybe her shoes. And they were kissing. And DC Comics said they would not publish that comic book with that cover because it was not the company's policy to engage in sexual themes on covers. This was during the early 90s, which was called the Bad Girl era.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of blatant sexuality on the covers of comic books. But DC said they would not publish Static 25 with this cover. And so a second cover was created, which became the front cover. And then you had to open that, and then you got to the second cover of the original thing. Dwayne McDuffie is editor-in-chief. And from what I was made to understand, of his sole decision, wrote an editorial basically stating that America was afraid of Black sexuality and how the unwillingness to publish the comic with that cover was hypocrisy. And shortly after that book came out, the relationship between the two companies started to erode at an accelerated rate. And that led to staff cutbacks, that led to budget reductions, and eventually the closing of the company's doors in 1997. But because of the Static Shock cartoon and its impact and the fact that it was something that Warner Brothers Animation, I think at that time was called WB Animation, did not have, people were like, okay, we've got to publish Milestone stuff. We've got this cartoon character. We've got to exploit that in publishing. So Milestone would come back again and again and again and again. But it would never stick like it did from 1993 to 1997. So there was a previous attempt to combine the Milestone superhero universe and the DC superhero universe, and it didn't quite take. Milestone relaunched in 2020 in digital format and in physical publishing in 2021, in a big endeavor called Milestone Returns. And Milestone Returns ended in 2025 with a storyline that I wrote to
Mm.
basically be the Avengers Endgame of the Milestone Returns relaunch. It was called The Shadow Cabinet. And right now in 2026, we're about to have a book called New History of the DC Universe, The Dakota Incident, which is a piece of the big DC narrative that Mark Waid, who you mentioned, has crafted with a group of artists, in which it outlines the entire history of the DC universe from the time of cavemen to
Hmm.
like the 31st century with the Legion of Superheroes, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so this one shot is another attempt, and I'm going to say possibly a better attempt, like
Hmm.
truly a better attempt
And this
at
comes
the
out next
fusion
week,
of
doesn't
the,
it?
yes, of the fusion of the Milestone universe and the DC Super Universe. I co-wrote this book. Um, Combined, this book has over 22 creators. It's something that we're all very proud of, and we firmly believe it speaks to the Milestone superhero universe and the DC superhero universe. And I say that as someone who's been reading DC Comics since he was a kid. Um, so Milestone is this thing that it keeps coming back. And I think it all comes down to Static. Static is this character that DC has never been able to break the code of.
Hmm.
They've tried. They've
That's
tried multiple times.
that's
And
Dwayne's creation too, no?
Dwayne, Dennis, Michael Davis, and I think Christopher Priest. I think when you really dig into the weeds, it was the four of them,
Okay.
right? Um, and so that's what Milestone is, and Static has recently returned as part of the big DCKO event. We're doing the one shot. So this could be a new reemergence for the characters and those heroes. And to me, what's potent about the Milestone heroes is I feel like similar to Marvel and DC, I feel like they're multi-generational,
Hmm.
right? We just talked about Batman, Absolute Batman. Batman was created in 1939.
Hmm.
How many
Hmm.
generations is that? Is that four?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So these iconic characters, these mythologies are multi-generational. And so it'll be very interesting to see what generation, what the young people of today think of these characters as they reemerge,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So that's basically it in the most succinct way I can say.
So I want to put a pin in something that may or may not be relevant, and then I want to talk about something, and then we can get back to what I'm pinning, which
Sure.
is you're honoring obviously the milestone by having been working in editorial and shepherding and all the iterations. So you
Yes.
discussed that milestone, and then I was kind of curious, in quotes, what would be your milestone? But we'll get to that in a minute. I have a
Okay.
question. Um, I have grown up my entire life seeing versions of Dean in comic books, movie, straight white man. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it never occurred to, and when I saw the Black Panther movie in an audience of a lot of black people, and I'm watching the movie, I'm like, it's a good movie. And I've seen this kind of story before a little bit, like, the emergence of a hero. We've seen it a billion times, but it was done Black Panther style. So I thought it was good, but then to watch people feel like they see themselves, like they get to be, have that story, or seeing Wonder Woman and seeing young girls become a hero, see a woman, and see that's what they could become. All right, I get it, and that's awesome. Um, and it was really important in '93. You said it was Milestone started
Yes.
to
Yes.
have that separation, let's call it segregation of sorts, of we need to have a line of black superheroes or multi right, types of people by black creators, right? But I remember sitting in the studio with Kari Randolph, maybe during that time, like 2017 or whatever year it was. And we were talking about how in Harlem there was going to be a Black Comic Con or something like that. And I think it was Kari or maybe N. Stephen Harris or somebody that was like, they were going to maybe go, but they didn't want to be necessarily a part of it. And again, I'm forgetting who said this black
Yeah,
creator,
yeah,
because what they were saying was, I don't want to go to a, I don't want to segregate myself. I want to be at the Comic-Con and
right,
not have to be
right,
worried about being black or
right.
representing black.
Is that the
And
Schomburg
whenever,
show,
and the
maybe?
amount of jobs that people have gotten recently because of their gender, their race, their
Yeah,
whatever challenges them,
yeah,
has become a thing more than ever before. And it's because we need representation, we need to be seen, or everyone needs to be seen and represented. Of course, I get it, but almost to the detriment of the things that the reason why they need to be seen.
right.
What is your feelings about that? Like, where do you want to be? Do you want to be, I'm black and check me out, or do you want to be part of the bigger, I assume it's the bigger picture? But how do
Yeah.
you feel about that? And what is your feelings, and what have you gone through in those?
Okay. So I'll say two things, right? It's kind of like two things can be true at the same time.
Hmm.
And there's a phrase, I can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? It's like I'm a black creator and I'm a comic book creator, right? Like I don't have to choose and I don't want to choose,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And even if I was so emotionally dysfunctional that I wanted to choose, like, well, I don't want to be black today, right? It's like there's no escaping this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, I don't have a complexion in which that's an option, right? So it's like I can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I'm proud of that, right? And so something about Black Panther that I'd like to state is Black Panther was not just supported by black money.
Hmm.
A bunch of people saw Black Panther
Hmm.
because at the core of Black Panther, just like at the core of Batman Begins, is a theme of civic responsibility, right? T'Challa realized that for Wakanda to have so much, while there was abject poverty and people were killing one another, and they did not have technological resources, medicine resources, philosophical resources to withhold all of that is to be irresponsible as a citizen of the world,
Hmm.
right? Civic responsibility, which is to have and to give to the community. That was at the center of Black Panther. And that is a theme that is not exclusive to any race.
Hmm.
I think that's why, I think that's one of the reasons why Black Panther was the
Hmm.
juggernaut that it was
Yeah.
because of civic responsibility. And then I want to get to
Yeah.
something else you said, which is that, and this is really important, and this is a flaw of marketing. Like I'm gonna be real. I do not believe that in the 90s DC Comics marketed Milestone properly. I believe they marketed Milestone as black comics by black people with black heroes. And it's like, if you look at the Milestone line, it was diverse. There was an Asian lead in a book called Zombie, which was like a mystical book, which we kind of called Milestone's Vertigo title. There was a Cuban American character called Cobalt, who had your complexion, Dean, and he had a book. It was like there was a team book called The Shadow Cabinet with people from different places. It's like the whole idea that Milestone was black comics with black characters by black people is reductionist. And
Agreed.
and and what I recently said to someone is I feel like Milestone could be the Black Panther film of comics
Mhm.
because it has the universal themes that are not racially exclusive.
You just
Yeah.
described Black Panther in a way that I hadn't seen it in the movie. And all I think about right now is Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl.
Ugh.
Like,
Well,
Oh
you know,
man.
funny, you were talking about representation, and I'm half Puerto Rican, half Italian. My name,
Yeah.
you know, tells everybody that I'm Italian the second I walk in. But
Yeah.
being Puerto Rican is only really evident in the summer when I'm tan because I'm dark, you know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I watched that halftime show, and I really wanted to talk to you about it last week, Dean. And I totally forgot. And I was crying, like, and I wrote on Facebook that um, I felt connected to my grandparents in a way that I had never been connected to them before. And I grew up like they raised me, and I just didn't like I didn't understand the language. I mean I understand it, but I like not that fast. You got
Yeah.
to sing you
Yeah.
got to sing a lot slower for me to get it. But
Yeah.
like it made me feel connected to a heritage that I had always kind of not put behind me or code switched to be white presenting or whatever, just that like like it wasn't pushed down my throat. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it just made me feel a part of a bigger a bigger diaspora of people. And what's funny is my older sister is half black, half Puerto Rican, so I always knew that Puerto Ricans, we were everywhere. We
Yeah.
mixed with
Of course.
everybody. And the two of us going back and forth, texting while it's going on, it's just like, I'm connected to my sister too, in a way that we would probably never have been before and stuff. So um I don't know, like there's not very many Puerto Rican superheroes. I'm working on it. And Edgardo has his,
Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez.
representing.
I mean, what
So
Ivan Velez Jr. did with Blood Syndicate in the 90s,
yeah.
right? I mean, where we just had, I think this year is it the 50th anniversary? I think it's the 50th anniversary of the White Tiger,
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Marvel's White Tiger character, Hector Ayala. Um, here's the thing about the Bad Bunny performance, or here's one of the things, because I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say here's the thing, but go into what we just said about being able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? Like that performance was just entertaining.
Mhm.
You saw the energy, you saw the people, you heard the music, and even if you couldn't understand one word, there was a pride
Mhm.
that was tangible coming through the screen. Now, for the people who understood all the references, it was a history lesson, right?
Yep.
It was a history
Yep.
lesson about the immigrants, working in the sugarcane fields, right? And so it's like we have been sold a false bill of goods that we are each other's enemies.
Hmm.
But last century, Ellis Island was the place where people from so many people came here to try to raise their families and start businesses and build a future. And it's tragic that we are being sold a false bill of goods, right? And I'm
More than ever right now.
more than ever. I am in an interracial marriage. My wife is white. She's Jewish born. I have learned that her mom advocated was in was in the civil rights movement, marching with people. She helped campaign for, I think, the first black mayor in New Jersey. Like, we're connected by a common humanity, right? This false bill of goods is a lie, man.
Agreed.
And it's tiring.
Mhm.
It's not only tiring, you know what it is? It's this. We have split the atom. We have created railroads, ships, and planes that we can get to the other side of the planet in 24 hours. We've created the internet. We've created technology that was fictitious in the 60s.
Yeah.
We are humanity, and the best thing that we have to offer is racism. That's the best that we got. Racism, sexism. We've gone to the stars. Racism is the best you got? then you are unimaginative and you are pathetic and you are not living up to the potential of your species.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
And in some small way, we can say, we can speak to the truth of humanity in comics,
Well, that's what you said about uniting humanity, like to right off the top.
right?
And just like we were
So,
describing the Bad Bunny performance being entertainment but also educational, or if you didn't know one word, you still understood it omnisciently. That's also what comics does because of the pictures, because it's words and pictures. It's the same
yes,
idea. There's a
yes,
dance that, and there's the
yes.
gutters that, suspend time or advance time or whatever happens between panels, and underneath the panels. Um, Before we get to like, because we've used the word union a couple of times, and there was an article that came. We'll get to that
That's
in a minute.
that's the third act.
That's a hot topic maybe, but not to put you on the spot, but like, uh, I mean, it's got to happen. You got to have the Joe Illidge, and I'm only gonna call it Milestone, the Joe Illidge universe. Like
Okay.
you're the Stan Lee of your comic book company.
Yeah. Yeah.
That do you think that can happen? Do you think it's gonna
Yeah.
happen?
It's going to happen, but it won't be superheroes.
Okay.
It won't be superheroes. There are so many other genres, man.
Absolutely.
And if I'm going to keep it real for you, I've spent more than half my life in the superhero genre.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I there's a particular genre that I'm a big fan of, and I want to flex in that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do this right, I'll launch it next year. And
Mm-hmm.
it'll be small and it'll probably be through another publisher, but I will very clearly state what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I do want to build a universe and I do want to bring people together, but not in that genre. And it's not because I don't have anything to say in that genre, but it's because if you talk about business and Dean, I think this speaks to your career, your life, and um, you're humble to some degree, but you know that you're a natural leader, whether it's intended or not. Um, in business, it's more interesting to make your own lane. If you try and operate in a lane that is dominated by two big dogs fighting it out, you can't prosper there, right? So why am I going to create something and try to operate in a lane that two big dogs are fighting every day? It's like, I don't need to do that. Why don't I go over here? Why don't I create something that, as far as I could tell, is not happening in North American comics and go hard on it? And if I see anyone else try to do that, it's like, you're biting my style, dude. Because this wasn't here before and I dropped it, and 6 months later, what's that? But then I've changed the dynamic because then you're biting my style. I'm not biting Marvel and DC style, right?
Yep.
So the Joe Illidge universe is coming. I hope I can launch it next year, and it'll be an endeavor to make the best comics.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
Illiverse.
Hey, listen, the Illidge verse, the ill verse,
The
whatever. I mean, well,
Illverse.
listen, I have a Luminous, so
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
so the name may already be there. So we'll see. We'll see.
Man. Uh, Before we get to the union, did you have anything else, Vito, in terms
Well,
of?
I wanted to kind of bring up the idea of the Dakota Incident History of the DC Universe
Yes,
comic that comes out next week. You had this initiative that you were pushing for to get, what was it, 100,000 or 10,000?
100,000 copies sold.
Yeah.
Yes.
And today I read somewhere that someone leaked it, or that DC leaked it or something like that. And I just
What
want
happened? Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I just want to get your thoughts on that because, like, I know that I ordered it, so I mean, you got one,
Well,
but
thank you. Listen, thank you for that. It's like it takes increments.
Sure.
Movements are made by increments. So what happened was, so yesterday morning, there's a text chain with the four writers. And yesterday morning, one of the writers sends a text that says, "Hey, this is on the DC Universe Infinite app, able to read." And I'm just like, okay, this was not on my bingo card to how to start my Wednesday morning. I wanted a bacon and egg sandwich from the bodega 3 blocks away. Well, that's not happening. Right. So I sent an email to various people at DC, editorial, a few people from publicity, just in case they would want to do damage control. And DC's on the West Coast, so it's early for them. And it was like 11 a.m. for me here in New York. And yeah, so this thing happened. We said, hey, could you do something about it? And like in 45 minutes, it got shut down. But when something hits the internet through piracy, through opportunists, then it's out there forever. And yesterday, people were only dropping a page there and a page there. But this morning, I see some individual posting crucial 2-page scenes.
Yeah.
And I did a Joe Illidge and I said, I can't accept that. I'm going to do something crazy. Right. And what I did was I shot a video and I spoke to the people, the fans, the community, the laypersons, and I said, hey, do not let someone steal from you the joy of reading a story. Don't let them steal from you the importance of making sure that a character is symbolic, aesthetic, will have a continued life in publishing. Because the goal of the Dakota Incident 100K challenge, the reason 100,000 copies is because companies are not people. We should not expect human attributes from them. We should not expect ethics. We should not expect sympathy. We should not expect altruism. We should not expect love. They are run by profit. And the only way that you can compel a publisher to give you more of what you want is to show them a demand that says, oh, if we give them more of what they want, we will make more money than we spend.
Right.
We will make profit. 100,000 copies, which these days is not an easy feat. Absolute Batman's one of the only titles pulling off selling 6 figures. Okay. 100,000 copies of this book means that the community can say to DC Comics, I want an ongoing static series. Not a 4-issue, not a 6-issue, not an 8-issue. I want ongoing, so that the character is continually embedded in the culture, so that young people can find him and older people can find him, because this character is important. This character is a billion-dollar franchise. He's your Miles Morales and you're keeping him in a box. He's your Black Panther film and you're keeping him in a box. It doesn't make any sense. So we're going to show you that it can be profitable so that it makes sense to you. So the pirating and the revealing of these pages would serve to then undermine the goal of selling 100,000 copies, because some people would be like, well, hell, I read it. I don't need to buy it now, right? So I wanted to communicate to them why buying it was important. And I wanted to remind them that these ideas that we create impact people. And I wanted to remind them of the joy of actually reading a comic book. Like, okay, so let's say you see a digital file and you read the comic book. You don't experience the page turns. You don't experience the revelations. You don't experience the surprise. You don't get to touch it with your hands and touch the thing that dozens of people labored over to make for you. Do not let those people who do not understand this take that from you at a time in which intelligence is being made the enemy and literacy is being made the enemy, and books is being made the enemy, and graphic novels are being made the enemy, getting banned. Librarians are being called criminals. Don't let people of small minds take from you the joy of reading. Don't let them take from you this experience, man. What are we
Yeah.
doing here?
Do you know
Like,
what I?
comics are magical. The world has changed because of Marvel Studios. There's no Marvel Studios without Marvel Comics. Netflix and Paramount are wrestling over buying Warner Brothers Discovery. Well, they're going to get the DC superhero universe. Batman is one of the most profitable intellectual properties on this planet, and he came from a comic book in 1939. We need people to understand what they kind of already know, but they need a reminder of that these things, man, they're freaking amazing.
Do you know who I just heard speaking? I heard the kid that went up to Marvel Comics on a tour looking at a piece of artwork.
Hmm.
Like that is exactly the person. Like when you were talking about like holding it in your hands, I was like, oh, Joe just channeled his like young self, like his youth. Like it's almost like you cross two streams almost.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm a believer. I mean, we're all
Yeah, your
believers.
passion is definitely, no one can take away your passion for the medium, that's for sure.
I
Yeah,
did your appeal work? Number one, and number two, because I was understanding as you were saying it, because I'm not privy or aware of what had happened the other
yeah,
day. So it seems
yeah,
like some of the comic got leaked online, as these
yeah,
things do, and I always wonder,
yeah.
did the publisher do it? I mean, okay. And then because
Who
you
knows?
watch a movie trailer these days and you just saw the whole movie in the
Yeah.
trailer.
Right,
Okay,
right,
whatever. Good.
right.
But
Yeah.
then did you hit the 100K? Do you happen to know? Did you?
I don't know, and I honestly think what it would take to hit that is the first printing has to run out, and then we have to go to a second printing, and the
Right,
second printing has to run out, right?
right, right.
And, number one, there were people who responded on social media. They were like, you know what? I'm gonna get two copies, or you know what? I'm doubling up. So people did directly respond to it, which was heartwarming. Not just for myself, but for all the people that made the thing, right? And but you know, I think I think people need clarity. I think it has to be more than say, "Hey, buy more," or
Hmm.
"Hey, buy it." Like your destination needs to be clear and it needs to be right in view. And I was like, well, then let's really go for it, right? Like, because DC cannot deny 100,000 copies
No,
of
no one could.
sales. Exactly. No one could. So create the goal that is undeniable. All right.
This
That's
this will
business.
be up on Monday, so everyone go out tomorrow. Tuesday's New Comic Book Day for DC. Go out tomorrow, get your History of the DC Universe, the Dakota Incident #1. And I would love to. Like I said, I already ordered it. I want a second print now, so I can buy the second print.
Dude,
You know what I mean?
I
Like, why
appreciate
not?
it. I appreciate it. And yeah, man, I mean, I, this is just fun. I mean, comics are fun. They're also a business, but they're fun. When you read them, you're to some degree, you're having fun, or you're getting to escape, or you see yourself seen in these stories, right? So it's like, what? Why are you gonna take away somebody's fun? Come on.
It's funny because we're talking about that tactile experience, which
Yeah.
we grew up, and that's how we you know uh our first date with comics was holding them and turning those pages, like you said,
Yeah.
and that's forever in us. And then we have a whole bunch of people. Like I always think, like I'm going to be teaching comic book storytelling for 3 days at the Art Students League in April. But I
Nice.
am thinking that's cool, and I love that, and I love storytelling. I love like teaching that or mentoring and stuff once in a while. But I also think my initial instinct is, where do you buy a comic book anymore? There are barely any comic shops left, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then I think, oh, well, right, that's right. There's the internet, there's Webtoon, there's And I remember like when I launched Activate in 2006, like
Yes.
people are like,
Yes.
why are you putting up free comics online? They must be bad and must suck because
Oh
it's
my goodness.
free. And like, no, that's not necessarily true. But so there's
Yeah.
all these different perceptions of what is a web comic. And even today, like what is a print comic? And sometimes I think print is a luxury item in a lot of ways. And especially when comic books are $4.99 and $5.99. Like I remember
Jeez.
35 cents. I remember 30 cents,
Yes.
for a comic book. Like, and I know that that's not the way anymore, but it seems to have gotten crazy pricing to the point where when I do my Kickstarter comic, and I'm charging 15 at the table because it truly is a luxury item because it isn't a Marvel or DC comic. It's not in the store. You can only get it at my table or I can mail to your mailbox or whatever. And that's not a great business decision for Dean Haspiel because the optics in the store are important, to be in a store. But I talked to I've talked to publishers about what if you carried my thing or whatever, or I've talked to retailers. They'll get a couple of copies and then be grateful that they sell out, because they have 1,000 other comics to sell that week.
Yeah.
So I'm just nervous about the business of comics and where it's going next. And I wrote recently, um, I've been reading Fantastic Four, I think since I was 12 or maybe younger, every
Wow.
issue every month. Okay,
Wow.
good or bad, whatever. And I imagine I'll be reading Fantastic Four until the day I die. And I realize that the legacy issue of the most recent Fantastic Four is like issue 733 or something, right? And I did the math. I said if they did the comic every month, that means that issue 1000 is going to come out in 22 years and I'll be 79 years old. Let's just say. But
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not the question. The question is, will there be monthly comic books in 22 years from now? I
Uh,
don't think
Great.
so.
That's a dude. That's a great question. I honestly don't know, but let me throw something out at you. We are in a return period to appreciation of tangible because I'll give you an example. So, these streaming companies came along, the streaming networks, and they were like, you don't have to buy DVDs anymore. You can subscribe for whatever a month and a vast shelf of films and TV shows and documentaries. It's all available for you. And we all fell for it like suckers. And then they started pulling the things off. You love Westworld? Too bad. Westworld gone. That Milestone documentary gone. And then in the absence of these things, it's like I want to own again. People want to own things. People here it is. We're still going by the rules of the 20th century comics business. Because I would argue that your your books are for an audience that is interested in quality, that is not interested in the typical, and they don't care what the price is.
Right.
There are people out there, they will pay for quality and the price is irrelevant. The problem, and this is something that I've heard in business and I continue to hear in business, we keep marketing to people who are broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do we market to people who are broke? Why do we market to the people who have the money? I'll give you an example.
Yep.
A guy I know, he's a retailer, good friend. He goes to a convention. Frank Cho is there. Frank Cho, who's done iconic Wonder Woman covers. And he says, hey, Mr. Cho, great to meet you. I'm a big fan. And he's like, hey, how much is that cover, that Wonder Woman cover? And Frank says, $15,000. He says, oh, wow. Okay. How much is that one there? He said, that one's $18,000. And he said, oh, wow. He's like, I'm gonna go talk to my wife about this. And, Cho's like, okay, you do that. Now, that was what I was told. And the guy says to me, wow, Frank Cho's really an asshole. I said, no,
No.
you're not the customer.
Hmm.
There are people with money for whom $18,000 so they can have an original one of a kind Wonder Woman cover. Wonder Woman, who everyone knows because she was just played by Gal Gadot. And they could have their friends over, their rich friends, and they could be like, yeah. And their rich friends could be like, damn, that's cool. You
Mm-hmm.
have original art, which we all know appreciates in value.
Mm-hmm.
Original
Mm-hmm.
things appreciate in value.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that the value of his art is not what the comic book industry tells him. It's what the market of his audience is. We need to stop trying to make high quality product for low payment propositions. And
Absolutely.
we need to target the people with the money for
Absolutely.
whom they don't give a damn. They would just be like, God damn it, I'm tired of Marvel and DC. Yo, what's this?
But you're also talking about the fine art world, like my girlfriend Jen, who's here. Uh, what does something cost? It's all made up, right? So when you put art something on a wall in a gallery, it changes the perception of something. And then if you said, oh, that's this high price, people will either balk and go, I can't pay that, or there will be people who have that kind of money and will kind of look at it and wonder. And it is, you're right. Like we have been taught to think small and be small because the industry, when we got into it, I'm not saying it was small, but like you said, trying to get a girl on a date and you talk about comic books, that wasn't happening back then. Now today, sure, okay, that can happen
What?
today. But 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 when we were younger and kids, hell no,
Yeah,
hell no.
yeah,
It was it was embarrassing to admit you read comics. Forget about I want to
yes,
write and draw them. That
yes,
you read them.
yes.
And I
That's right.
remember not the day, but maybe the year when comics became cool, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened? I don't understand. And then I realized later on, oh, money is what happened. A couple things happened. It made money, okay. There was suddenly IP that was more than just the Batman 60 show or George Reeves Superman and Christopher Reeves, Superman in the 70s. Um, and there was just like, and I remember people when I would introduce myself to somebody that was sometimes like at a higher echelon of, or above my pay grade, let's call it. The amount of people above my pay grade that when they find out I write and draw comic books will say to me, "Oh, I always wanted to do comics too," and I'm like,
Bingo,
Yeah.
"Really, really?"
bingo.
And then they became the CEOs, right? And
Uh-huh,
like, so there's something going on that I
uh-huh.
haven't quite figured out, you know?
Yeah. But won't it be fun when you figure it out?
But I do think you gotta see, this is something else I've talked to Vito about in the show and written about where I can't sell my original art. I can do commissions, and
Yeah,
it's very difficult because I don't know how to put a price on my art where I would be
yeah,
okay with letting it go because of
yeah.
the blood, sweat, and tears and whatever you want to call it that goes into it. Even if it's just a whatever, I spent time with that. That represents a part of my life, and I
So don't
know
sell it.
and I don't. And so I'm broke ass all the time because I actually make original art on paper, whereas a lot of today's artists are working digitally. And I've had people, I have an email right now. This guy wants to buy all my Warehouse 13 art. And I could probably make a lot of money. And I don't think about Warehouse 13. I don't even remember what I drew, you know? And I should be able to let it go. And I don't know what my problem is, but that's not for us to discuss today. It's something in my brain, or my
Well,
heart. I don't know.
you and I can get some coffee in a few weeks and try to crack the code
Okay.
of that because there's always isn't there always a third answer? We're told
There
that
has
there's
to
only
be.
two answers,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, there's a third answer. Let's see if we can figure it out. So
There is a third answer.
so so for the
But
third act, we've got to talk about unions in comics,
we
right?
we we will real quick, and I just wanted to ask before we went into unions and comics. Was
Yeah.
there? I brought up this thing that you talked about creating the villain first. Was there anything you wanted to say about that a little bit more? I feel like we might have veered away from
Yeah.
that. Was there anything? or just that people should check out your videos because you've been putting up these really cool videos.
Thank you
Because
very much.
you're 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 offering your services as a comics maker and a thinker and how
Yeah,
to think about comics. So do you want to briefly talk about that, and then we'll go into
sure.
Comics Union?
Sure. So, I have the company Illuminous, and Illuminous is primarily geared towards, ambitious entrepreneurs who want to turn their original IP into comic books and graphic novels. And I've been very clear where I say, don't make a movie or a TV pitch disguise a comic. I was like, no deals have ever been made from those, and people can smell those. I
Mm-hmm.
said, make good comics, and good comics are the foundation of multimedia empires, right? So I want to empower people. So the 60-second videos that I'm doing is kind of like giving people free information, right? It's like, hey, here's something to consider. When you want to take it to the next level, reach out to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Here's something to consider. So the thing about creating the villain first, when you're creating your own thing, then you can do that, right? Like Marvel and DC, that's the superhero genre, which means you
Mm-hmm.
have to create the hero first. But if it's you, you can create the villain first. And here's what comes from creating the villain first. Creating the villain first then means who the hell is going to be able to go up against that? I've just created Goliath. Wow, now I got to create David.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Especially
Like,
when David shows up and you're like, you gotta be kidding me.
bingo, exactly. Because
Gotta
because
be kidding.
because drama is that you can't possibly believe the hero could win.
Mm-hmm.
You can't possibly believe that Daredevil can beat Wilson Fisk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't believe that. Especially
Mm-hmm.
since Wilson Fisk just manages to go higher and higher up the social and political and financial strata, right? It wouldn't be dramatic if Daredevil could easily beat him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you create Wilson Fisk first, and then you create the underdog who has to go up against Wilson Fisk, now you're talking,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
now you're having
Mm-hmm.
some real fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of talk to people about methodology, but I also want them to know that because they're creating their original ideas, they can break rules.
And absolutely. I mean, Vito, can you talk briefly about I mentioned that I saw Absolute Batman from afar as and one of the components being like a bootleg Batman. Like you're approaching a Batman bootleg story, I think. Well, can you talk briefly about it without spilling too many beans?
Well, I think more to Joe's point would be the underboss story that we've been talking about on here for a little while, where it's an ambitious underboss to a gangster, to like a boss, and he wants to take over, and it's what are the means that he's going. So he's the villain of the villain, and
Yeah.
The villain
it's
of the villain.
very
Yeah.
it's along the lines of what Joe's saying, like like all right, if he's the bad guy, is there someone worse above him, or who does he rub up against? Like what
Hmm.
Yeah.
kind? Because all fiction is friction. Like it's all about
100%.
who rubs against somebody the wrong way. Can't have a protagonist without an antagonist.
Hmm.
Damn right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Damn right. It's
So
Walter White and Gus Fring.
Yeah, yeah,
totally, totally. I saw I think it was on Bleeding Cool or something about a certain amount of creators wanting to create a union of sorts, which I've been hearing about since when Neil Adams tried to do it in the 70s, I think,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right.
And like I just feel like because it's a freelance, I mean, maybe there I know that the certain creators are artists and writers are hired to be exclusive at a company, right?
Yes.
And then there's a ton of freelancers, like most people who work in comics, I feel are freelancers, right? Um, how do you what how do you decide what's a page rate? how do you decide what the rules are behind making comics? Like
Hmm.
I think it's pie in the sky to think that you could unionize comic book
Hmm.
creators. You know, like
Hmm.
what's your feeling about that?
So I'm on the board of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. The executive director is Jeff Trexler, who is a formidable lawyer. And I don't know it like he does, but he has explained to me legally it is non-viable because we're talking freelancers. But put that in a box and let's say it was viable. There's two problems: globalization and scabs.
Hmm.
Globalization, right? A number of publishers have I'm going to say a decent percentage of subcontractors who are
Mm-hmm.
not from the United States,
Mm-hmm.
who are from
Yeah.
places where the American dollar goes much further. So those wages are not equivalent to the wages of like domestic contractors, right? And that way these publishers increase their profit. So there's that effect that the companies just can keep going overseas, right? Because there are so many people out there that they're like, oh my God, if I get to draw Spider-Man, you could kill me right now and I will have lived life.
Hmm.
Because they've loved Spider-Man since they were 6 or
Right.
whatever. So there's globalization. And what it would take, and I don't see, God, I don't know. If all the agents got together and said, we're going to come up with a universal rate, the publishers have to pay the universal rate and no less, or we will not give them access to creators. And the creators would have to trust the agents.
Yeah.
That is how you would address globalization. Now let's talk about scabs. In any union negotiation, you worry about the people who will cross the line and undermine the people who are striking, right? Those are scabs. We're talking comics. You really think the entire domestic contractor community of comic book creators in unison will choose not to work for any of these companies? All it takes is one, and they undermine it. And I guarantee you there would be scabs.
I think that happened. I would even hazard to say that I'm not saying Jack Kirby did this, and I forget who it was, but I felt like there was a time when you could only work at one company and you weren't welcome at the other company because there was competition. They just change your name and work under a pseudonym, and
Right,
so they were
right.
working at both
Dick
under
Ayers, I think, did that.
maybe Dick Ayers or whoever, like
Wow.
people like that. But I feel like that the people who'd be striking, and I have my agent told me not to, right? Would then be like, I'm gonna just change my name and maybe draw, a little differently, you know. I mean,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like that's
mm,
what would happen. I
mm.
think. I mean, but it doesn't make sense in a freelance world, is what I'm saying. It
I think
doesn't
the
make
Yeah,
other
sense.
part, the other part too, is that you look at somebody like Jim Lee, who is the president of DC Comics. I don't think that, how does he fall into this? Like he doesn't have to have a page rate. He, runs the company. He gets a salary
But
anyway.
he needs to
he,
represent, or I think one of the reasons why he's a great guy, and I think one of the reasons
Yeah.
why he's maybe hired is because he represented the art side of comics, right? To be the publisher, and he recently went against AI, which again are the like just like how do you control freelance? You can't. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to control AI.
Mhm.
Trust me, AI is going to somehow trickle into DC Comics and Marvel Comics if they haven't already, So I don't know. It's everywhere, and I do think the more maybe the takeaway in some ways is like Joe. I know you want to sell your Illiverse or Illigeverse, to a publisher, or not sell it, but work in conjunction with a
yeah,
publisher.
yeah.
But man, be your own publisher, man. That's what I think.
Well,
Be your
Dean,
own
that's a
publisher.
that's a that's a sequel interview.
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
couldn't just talk about that in 5 minutes. Like
No, I
to
know, I know. I'm
to
just
talk about that,
no, I know.
that's a long-term conversation.
Absolutely.
Let me put it to you this way. Let me put it to you this way. Um, it's funny. I was actually coming back from I was coming back from a bodega today, and I was thinking about the growth of business. And I said, for a business to grow, at the very least, you have to be able to identify what you can delegate and identify what you can automate.
Hmm.
If I can create a business in which I can delegate and automate enough and make enough profit that publishing makes sense, I would take it on. But it would have to make sense. And have to make sense means it is financially liquid. It is not dependent upon VC money because VC money is finite. And when it runs out, then what? What are you going to do? You're going to fall. And then when you fall and there's a press release on you in a website, what does that symbolize for the industry? What does that symbolize to the creators? What does that say for the future of comics? So it would need to be operationally viable, financially liquid, and small in scale and ambition. I'm not going to publish a Catalyst Prime of 7 books.
No, no.
One book at a time, at a time.
Hmm.
Start with one.
And if you're going to do it by the people for the people, you open up a comic shop that's also a 24-hour laundromat that sells beer and coffee and publishes a couple of comics, one comic book a month.
Well, here's a funny thing. One or two things that you've said I have suggested to other people. And I think what I would also say to that is, okay, so we talked about, the value of tangible things that we're changing, we're turning a corner.
And experience. I meant to add that too. People want experience because they're tired of their phones. They want to be around things that are happening.
That is happening. There's a entrepreneur, really meat and potatoes guy, talks really loud, cusses a lot, but he's kind of a genius. His name is Gary V. Follow Gary V on TikTok. And he talks about that. Like, we are heading towards a renaissance of in person, in real time experiences.
Yep.
We need to fashion our businesses to that, right? And part of what will make the things interesting is to make a small quantity of them
Mm-hmm.
so that if you got it, you got it. And if you didn't get it, you missed out, which means the next time this person or this publisher puts out something, be first or second online. Don't dilly-dally.
Mm.
We need to create value because we know that intrinsically we make things of value. We need to create value in the language that the people with the money understand. And what they understand is quality and exclusivity. This is dope and I'm cool because I got one and you don't.
Right.
FOMO and
Bingo.
whatever that Wu-Tang album that
I
Wu-Tang
mean, dude, I don't know which one it is.
sold to that dude. That only
But-
that one guy, and that guy went on to become a famous asshole. Anyway,
But yeah, dude.
Went to
yeah,
jail.
I mean, I guess we're gonna wrap this up. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for dropping all that science and knowledge and experience.
But thanks for having me. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a minute, which is great. And I appreciate being able to talk with y'all on a Thursday night, and I appreciate the fact that you both love comics. I mean,
Yeah, man.
Dean, it's in your DNA. It's funny, we didn't even speak about the fact that you did some stuff for me on Catalyst Prime,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
You
That's
did
right.
those 5 covers
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
series called Kino. And what I loved about those 5 covers is that if you put those 5 covers together, it was a story.
yeah, yeah. Well, that
Imagine
was
that.
you,
Like,
but I think that was you. That was because I think that was your
that
idea,
was a
basically.
synthesis of both. But imagine that.
You know?
Imagine comic books covers that tell stories.
Hmm.
Isn't
Yeah.
isn't That's something that should come back.
I mean, listen, totally. And I do think the future of non-Marvel and DC comics is graphic novels, anthologies, and one-shots. And when I say one-shots, I mean like you can get the second one, and but they feel satisfying and self-contained.
Right.
The story,
Yes.
like when we read
Yes.
comic books when we were kids.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
maybe there was a beat to be continued, but that issue felt substantial and like you got a story. You know,
That's
so
right.
anyway.
That's right. Well,
All
good
right,
talking with
man.
y'all.
Joe, where do
Thank
we
you so much
follow
for
you
having
on?
me.
Where do we follow you on the internet?
Oh my God. So, um, I'm Joe Illidge on Facebook. I'm Joseph Illidge on TikTok. Joseph Philip Illidge on LinkedIn. I think I'm Joseph P. Illidge on Blue Sky. And yes, I'm still on X. Please, people, don't talk to me about that. There are strategic reasons. I'm sorry. And all of these platforms are owned by billionaires. Um, and then I'm Illmaster1 on Instagram. Joseph Illidge on Threads.
Sweet.
Excellent. Thank
All
you
right, man.
very much for coming on. We appreciate it, and we adore you, and we look forward to the next.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll be talking. Dean will figure out how to crack the cozier stuff, and I wanna hear about this underworld, this underboss story because it sounds pretty cool. So whatever you do, get it out.
Absolutely.
Get
Thank
it
you.
out. It like completion beats perfection every time. Just
Mm.
get it out.
That's the nugget to take away from this one.
All right.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Vito.
Thank you, Dean.
All
We'll
right.
talk to you next week. Thank you very
Have
much.
a good one, y'all.
Peace.
Bye.